On the evening of August 10, 2012, 13 women lined up in the Olympic Stadium in London for the final of the women's 1,500 meters. To the 80,000 fans in the stands, it looked like sport at its purest, a tactical, closely fought race decided by nerve and a final sprint. What almost nobody watching knew was that they were witnessing what would later be branded, by outlets from the BBC to ESPN to The Independent, the dirtiest race in Olympic history. Over the following 13 years, 5 of the 13 finishers would be disqualified for doping. The gold medal would change hands. The podium would be rebuilt, torn down, and rebuilt again. Athletes who crossed the line in the middle of the pack would eventually be awarded medals they never got to celebrate on the day, some more than a decade later. This is the story of how one Olympic final became a case study in everything wrong, and eventually everything corrective, about doping in athletics. Going into London 2012, the women's 1,500-meter field was loaded with intrigue. Some of the sport's biggest names weren't even guaranteed a spot in the final. World Championship bronze medalist Natalia Rodriguez and the young Ethiopian star Genzib Dibaba both failed to make it out of the qualifying heats, a first sign that the rounds leading to the final were unusually unpredictable. The middle heat ran noticeably slower than the other two, a hint of the tactical games that would define the competition. Among those who did advance were a mix of established contenders and athletes whose names would later become notorious. Turkey's Asli Kikir Alptekin, a runner who had already served a doping ban years earlier. Russia's Tatyana Tomashova, a two-time world champion who had also previously been suspended for manipulating drug test samples, and a cast of Olympians, Bahrain's Maryam Yusuf Jamal, Ethiopia's Abiba Oregawi, the United States' Shannon Roberry and Morgan Useni, and Great Britain's Lisa Dobrysky and Laura Whiteman, who would all, in different ways, become part of the story. The semi-finals only deepened the sense that something unusual was unfolding. In the first semi-final, Bahrain's Mimi Belid led into the final straight before fading badly, unexpectedly opening a qualifying spot for Roberry. In the second semi-final, Tomashova pushed the pace from the front. Gamze Bulut of Turkey surged past her, with 600 meters to go, and Oregawi kicked past Bulut in the final 200 meters to win in a personal best. The defending world champion, American Jennifer Simpson, was left scrambling and failed to advance. By the time the field of 13 was set for the final, including a tie for the last qualifying spot, several of the sport's biggest stars were already out, and several of its future disgraced champions were in. The final itself started cautiously. Bulut and Jamal shared the lead through a slow opening lap, with Jamal visibly looking around, seemingly reluctant to do the work at the front. The pace only picked up as the bell rang for the last lap, at which point the field surged. Early in that final lap, American Morgan Useni, who had suffered a similarly cruel fall at the World Championships the year before, was clipped from behind and went down in tears, her medal hopes ending on the track. Alptekin moved to the front with 300 meters remaining. Oregawi, Jamal, and Bulut jostled behind her on the back straight. Coming into the home stretch, Jamal looked poised to challenge for the lead, but couldn't quite close the gap. 20 meters from the line, Oregawi suddenly faded as Jamal, and then Bulut swept past her. Alptekin crossed the line first in 4 minutes and 10.23 seconds, with Bulut taking silver and Jamal claiming what was, at the time, bronze. The suspicion started almost immediately. Lisa Dobrysky, the British runner who finished 10th, was blunt in her BBC interview moments after the race, declining to name names, but stating plainly that she didn't believe she was competing on a level playing field. Her comments drew criticism at the time. Accusing without accusing is an uncomfortable position for an athlete to take in the glow of an Olympic final. But within a year, the first cracks in the result began to show, and Dobrysky's instinct would prove devastatingly accurate. What followed was less a single scandal than a slow-motion collapse, playing out over more than a decade. Asli Kikir Alptekin. In May 2013, reports emerged that the Olympic champion had tested positive for a banned substance. Because it would have been her second doping offense, she faced a possible lifetime ban. In August 2015, she reached a settlement with the sport's governing body, surrendering her Olympic title and accepting an 8-year suspension for blood doping. She would later reoffend and be banned from the sport for life. Gamze Bulut. Turkish media reported in 2016 that Bulut's biological passport, a long-term profile of an athlete's blood values used to detect doping indirectly, showed signs of illegal performance enhancement. She was sanctioned in 2017 with a 4-year ban and had her results disqualified retroactively to 2011, wiping out her silver medal. Yekaterina Kostetskaya and Natalia Kuriva. Both were sanctioned in 2014 after biological passport abnormalities pointed to doping, voiding their results from the London final. Tatyana Tomashova. Tomashova's history was already checkered. She had served a 2-year ban from 2008 to 2010 for tampering with doping samples. Despite this, when the medals above her were stripped, she was elevated first to bronze and eventually to silver. That promotion didn't last. In September 2024, the Court of Arbitration for Sport banned her for 10 years after retesting of samples collected before and after the 2012 Games revealed anabolic steroid use. She lost the silver medal for good. By the time the dust settled, 5 of the original 13 finishers had been disqualified for doping. 6 of the top 9 were linked to performance-enhancing drug use in some form. It's the sheer density of the cheating, layered on top of athletes with prior doping histories being allowed to compete at all, that led ESPN to call it one of the dirtiest races in Olympic history, with the BBC and The Independent reaching for the same description independently. Fixing the results took even longer than exposing the doping. In 2017, the International Olympic Committee formally reassigned the gold medal to Maryam Yusuf Jamal, the Bahraini runner who had crossed the line third. The silver and bronze positions, however, were left vacant pending ongoing anti-doping cases further down the field. In 2018, the IOC filled those gaps, controversially elevating Tomashova to silver despite her own doping history, with Roberi moving up to bronze. That arrangement held for 6 years, until Tomashova's 2024 ban forced yet another reshuffling. In June 2025, the IOC Executive Board finalized the current standings. Jamal gold, Aregawi silver, and Roberi bronze. Medals awarded, in Roberi's case, 13 years after she actually ran the race. She is scheduled to formally receive her bronze medal at the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics, 16 years after the fact. Meanwhile, the ripple effects moved down the entire results sheet. Britain's Laura Whiteman, who crossed the line 11th, found herself elevated all the way to 6th. Dobrski, who finished 10th and voiced the first public doubts about the race, moved up to 5th. The women's 1,500-meter final wasn't an isolated incident. It was, in many ways, a snapshot of a broader crisis in the sport during that era. Analysis of the entire London 2012 athletics program later found that a striking share of finalists across all events had doping violations or clear associations with doping, with Russia's contingent especially implicated as the country's state-backed doping system was later exposed. But no single event concentrated that crisis as visibly as the women's 1,500-meter, where the athletes on the medal stand, the athlete who finished 4th, and multiple mid-pack finishers were all eventually found to have cheated. What makes the case particularly significant is how the cheating was ultimately caught. Not by testing in 2012, but by the retention and retesting of blood and urine samples years later, using improved detection methods for substances that weren't reliably detectable at the time. That process, imperfect, slow, and still ongoing more than a decade on, has become one of the strongest arguments for long-term sample storage and retroactive testing in the fight against doping. The 2012 Olympic women's 1,500-meter final will likely be remembered for 2 seemingly contradictory reasons. On one hand, it stands as a stark illustration of how deeply doping had penetrated elite athletics at the time, enough that nearly half the field in a single Olympic final would eventually be implicated. On the other, its slow, thorough unraveling over 13 years is also a story of accountability, however delayed. Samples were kept, science improved, and cheats were caught, even if it took until 2024 and 2025 to fully correct the record. For Lisa Dobrski, vindicated years after being criticized for her honesty. For Shannon Roberi, finally receiving a bronze medal she earned in 2012. For Laura Whiteman, watching her own result climb 5 places without running another step. The race is a reminder that in Olympic sport, the truth doesn't always arrive on the same night as the result. But for the athletes willing to wait, it can still arrive. And that's the story of the dirtiest race in Olympic history. A final that took 13 years, 3 medal reshuffles, and a wave of retroactive doping bans to finally sort out. Don't forget to subscribe, and thanks for watching. See you in the next one.